Good morning, kids, and welcome back to another episode of Fox Flicks on the Game Theaters. Today we're checking out a new video from the Game Theaters about the complete history of Poppy Playtime finally solved thanks to Chapter 3. Let's see what Manpower was able to dig up in that derelict facility. Let's hop in.
It's been 2 years since Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 released and took the
Whoa.
internet by storm.
Man,
it
been a
was
while.
everywhere. And so understandably, Chapter 2 was immediately put into production. 7 months later, there it was. Again,
Only
it was
7
a huge
months?
success, so naturally
Damn.
Chapter 3's development was underway. And so we waited, and waited, and waited. 18 months have gone by,
man.
and still we're
18
waiting. That doesn't mean
months?
Mob Games has left us completely empty-handed. They've been giving us little tidbits of lore in all kinds of strange places. But with all these little breadcrumbs of lore being dropped over such a long period, it can be
Just
hard
a little
to keep track
sprinkle.
of what we do and
Just a
don't
little
officially
sprinkle.
know. That is, until today. Today I'm giving you in one complete video the definitive Poppy Playtime timeline. The Poppy Playtime line. Poppy Playtime line. Poppy Playtime line. It feels like it doesn't work,
Poppy
but it
timeline.
works, technically. Just saying.
I would just say Poppy Timeline.
Hello, Internet!
That fits
Welcome
best.
to Game Theory, the show that'll stretch far and wide to find the lore. And while I'm busy doing that, why don't you give a big ol' huggy-wuggy to that subscribe button? We're always doing
Yeah,
videos
go on,
like this
hit
to
that
keep you guys
button.
up to date, and clearly it's necessary. I mean, Mob Games has gone a bit
Come on,
insane
hit
with the
it.
lore
Hit
drops
us.
for this one. It's not quite FNAF levels of let's release 20+ books with a single line of lore hidden in each one, but still, it's a lot to have
God.
to keep track of. Outside of the 2 main chapter releases, we've had a spin-off title with 3 phases and 2 VHS tapes, 3 found footage YouTube videos, 2 ARGs with dozens of tiny scraps of lore, and a partridge in a pear tree. They even hid lore in their
Nice.
anniversary videos. Like, who does that? Who does that? But
Mob
while their methods
Games?
might seem unorthodox, it does mean that there's a lot of lore and a lot of dates getting thrown around that are pretty difficult to keep track of, especially when all the story they've been seeding out happens decades before the actual games themselves. So today, we're gonna be wiping
right
the slate
about that.
clean and starting over. We're gonna be putting all the evidence together, all the theories we've had to create one cohesive timeline, so when Chapter 3 does release next month, we know exactly where we stand and what to
hell
expect.
yeah.
Strap on those grab packs, friends. It's time to lower ourselves into the depths of this haunted toy empire's history. The story begins not with any of the games, but rather with Playtime Co.'s website. On this now deleted webpage, we learn about the company's founder,
Oh.
Elliot Ludwig. He founded Playtime Co. in 1930 as a way to, quote, bring joy to children. He gave everything to
Very
his
nice.
company, but
Very
sadly
nice.
that work ethic would just wind up pushing his wife into divorce. Regardless,
Oh.
Elliot continued onward, determined to bring Playtime
Why is it that whenever someone creates a factory and wants to bring joy to children, it ruins their marriage? What the hell? Is there something wrong with wanting to be kind and generous to people around you? No, it's because you're not spending enough time with your wife. What the heck? Like, let me know down in the comments below what you guys think about that. Like, did she overreact and straight up divorce the guy just because he was being too nice? He was bringing joy to children. That's his job.
Code and new
Literally.
heights. And according to the controversial NFT collection, in 1950, the company created the toy that would put them on the map. In the most incredible doll video on YouTube announcing the game, we find our titular toy, Poppy Playtime. Elliot had outdone himself. Poppy wasn't just a lifeless doll, she could talk to you. She could even respond to questions, making her an instant hit with children everywhere. She was also an instant hit with the parents, because her hair smelled just like her namesake of poppies. Flower that doesn't actually have much of a scent, but does contain opium, which was used throughout history in children's medication to relieve pain and help sleep. So you had this new toy that every child wanted, and then parents would suddenly find that their kids were much calmer and sleepier. These toys started to fly off the shelves, and the company became a household name. That said, not all Poppies were created equally. All the regular Poppy dolls were incredible feats of engineering, but one was at a different level.
Only
Her conversational
one.
skills were like having a conversation with an actual person.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
But that wasn't a coincidence, because
So
she
she can move
was
on her own.
an actual person. Hidden in the game files is an unused ending monologue for Chapter 2, where Poppy reveals a lot more about her backstory. Specifically, this line right here.
Terrible things have happened, and I am the cause. Being able to
Okay.
exist as a doll, it has killed so many people.
And when you combine that with the maintenance VHS where we saw blood dripping off her voice box and those weirdly human-looking eyes of hers, it reveals that this Poppy was in fact a real person. Emphasis on was. Something happened to her, and I think we have a
Partly.
pretty good idea of what. It all comes back around to Elliot in the next decade of the timeline, the 1960s.
In the 1960s, an unfortunate family death had pushed Ludwig down to his lowest.
This family loss
The death
started
of
it
his
all, and I
daughter.
believe that this was the person who became Poppy, the first of what would be be many others. But Elliot didn't have any family that we know of. His wife divorced him 3 decades ago, and any children that he'd have had with her would be in their 30s at this point. That's why the prevailing theory is that Elliot had a young adopted daughter. He wanted to bring joy to children, to the point that he
Oh yeah, that's right. The whole factory had that whole adopt a child initiative, so it would just make sense that he too would have an adopted daughter or child, you know.
would encourage his employees to also adopt,
See,
even
there it
going so
is.
far as to build an orphanage on factory grounds.
That is why it is with enormous pleasure that I announce Playtime, our very own on-site orphanage.
Adoption and loving children was clearly on his mind, so the idea of him adopting a young orphan feels like a natural first step. And given that she was the only family that he had, her dying would be even more devastating to him, so he didn't let her die. Elliot took his dying daughter and preserved her inside a Poppy Playtime doll. In the most recent era, he started receiving documents that discuss using organic parts, which would explain why Poppy's eyes look so real and why she has blood covering her voice box. Those were her real eyes. That was her real blood, used in a last-ditch effort to save the daughter. And shockingly, it worked. Poppy came to life. His beloved daughter returned to him. He locked her away in a room of the factory that was designed to remind them of their family home, far away from everyone else, preserved in a glass box where he could visit her and keep her.
And yet, for some reason, there was a giant poppy flower around the door. Who did that? Was it Elliot or did someone else put that there? No, that's an actual question. Who painted that big-ass poppy?
Safe from anything else that might happen.
Poppy flower. Oop. Hold on, folks. We'll be right back. We got an ad. And we're back.
For the next couple of decades, the company hires more staff, like Leith Pierre as the head of innovation. They also release all sorts of popular toys like Brom the Dinosaur, Boxy Boo, Candy Cat, and of course, the company's next massive hit, the Blue Boy himself, Huggy Wuggy, followed quickly by Kissy Missy, because every Ken needs a Barbie.
Barbie has a great day every day. But Ken only has a great day if Barbie looks at him.
Despite that popularity, the company struggles to remain afloat.
When I look at this company we've built, I do not feel proud. Declining profits, failed experiments, people are constantly seeing things they shouldn't. How is that anything less than complete failure on our part? It's pathetic.
You never know.
Those, dear theorists, are the words of Harley Sawyer.
I'm called the Doctor.
And he isn't just bringing up problems, he's also the man with the solution.
I'm here now with a solution. The Bigger Bodies Initiative.
Oh no.
Toys. We can increase our workforce and simultaneously decrease the number of lawsuits and people on our payroll if the people we have working aren't people.
And the idea is all thanks to the one living toy that told us she started it all, Poppy. This leads us to the early 90s when the Doctor's plan is in full swing. It's here where we join him trying to recreate the magic that is Poppy, studying her in her little safe glass case, trying desperately to figure out how Elliot's daughter was able to continue living inside the doll. There are hundreds of experiments, one of which we see a report of on Elliot's desk in Chapter 2, Experiment 814. Based on the handwriting of this and several other notes, this appears to be a report written by the Doctor himself. And by this point, it's pretty darn clear what element of Poppy he's focused on. Quote, the experiment utilized a live rat. Rat was fed 3 portions daily for 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, the rat was killed and submerged into a poppy flower preservative gel mixture. 1 week later, an electric shock was applied to the rat in an attempt to revive it. The rat remained unresponsive. The Doctor suspects that poppy flowers and living parts are the 2 key factors to creating more living toys, but his experiments still wind up in failure. That said, the Doctor seems to have an idea as to why. Quote again, I still believe in the potential of the poppy flower. Perhaps something larger than a rat would yield different results. And in Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs reveals exactly what he meant by that.
It was always so sad to see the kids go. They called me Mommy because I was the closest thing they ever had to one. But they...
Also, that's literally your name, Mommy Longlegs. So, unless you want to be called Longlegs, Mommy is going to be the next best thing. So, egotistical much, Mommy? A little creepy.
And never come back.
What's the difference between Experiment 814 and Poppy? Poppy wasn't a rat. She was a human, a child, an orphan. Orphans have no parents, which means if they go missing, there's no missing persons report, no investigations, because who would miss them? It was the perfect crime and the perfect answer to the Doctor's experiment. To facilitate this, the company creates Playcare, Playtime's own on-site orphanage, as well as the Game Station, a facility designed to test and improve the skills of the orphan children. In Chapter 2, we see reports that show us the improvement of one specific child's skills, and in those reports, we see that they've they've been assigned a toy that they'll soon become. It's at this point that the Bigger Bodies Initiative has a breakthrough. Using pieces of organic parts and machinery, they're able to create a prototype of what they wish to create. Experiment 1006.
The prototype seems to possess an unprecedented level of intelligence beyond
all
that
we've
of
seen?
all other test subjects,
It's a single
as well as an
arm.
alarming willingness to commit violence.
The tape goes on to describe Huggy Wuggy, Experiment 1170, as fully obedient, which led me to believe that there was something different about 1006. For him to be more intelligent means that he must have stronger cognitive function than the orphans. Children
A
are
full
easier
brain?
to control. You can tell him what to do because you're an adult, an authority figure. But what if 1006 was a fellow adult? That might make it harder to control, especially if there's someone with supreme intellect and creative building skills.
The prototype seemingly disassembled the digital alarm clock within his room and utilized the battery, along with several other components, to
make
create
a laser pointer.
pointer, which he then fired into the security camera, disabling it.
Click.
Who's an adult in this franchise that we know has the genius and creativity to make some of the most beloved toys in the world? None other than Elliot Ludwig himself.
Damn it,
Now,
wrong guy.
initially, I theorized that he became 1006 because he was an adult who loved and cared for orphans, and so when he discovered that the doctor was using him for his experiments, he went to shut the whole thing down, only for the doctor to silence him.
Yoink.
That's why 1006 is so aggressive towards the scientists in the tapes, and why he'd later lead the charge in an uprising against Playtime Co. that he would call the Hour of Joy, reminiscent of what he always wanted to achieve, bring
That bit of lore of this is actually in the spin-off game Project Playtime. So you can either play as one of the people trying to collect toy parts and get the heck out of there, or you play as one of the three big monsters
joy to
with
children.
weird skins.
Still missing. Today's events are no doubt in relation to him.
But here's the problem. Since that theory, there's been a few pieces of evidence that tell us that Elliot was fully aware of the experiments happening on the orphans. There's an email that appeared in the most recent ARG, written by Elliot, that says, quote, "One of those dang Huggy Wuggies is loose. For it to get loose, it has to be alive, meaning a child had to have been converted into a version of Huggy." This email would also disprove Elliot as being 1006, because Huggy Wuggy...
Well, hold on. That, would it be the big one that we all know, or would it be like one of those small ones from the Chapter 2 mini-game? Probably one of the small ones, not the big one, considering, well, you know, the big one would be upstairs.
is experiment 1170, and if these people have any respect for the scientific process, 1170 should come after 1006. That said, that email has actually been redacted by Mob Games. It's no longer available in the ARG. Main reason? I suspect it's the date. It's labeled June 23rd, 1981. You see, Huggy Wuggy the toy wasn't even created until 1984, 3 years after that date. In his description in Project Playtime, it specifically calls out that he's, quote, "a living giant version of the famous Playtime Co. toy." So Giant Huggy couldn't exist in 1981 if the toy he's based on didn't exist in 1981. Looks like the timeline's getting tricky to keep track of, even for the creators of the timeline. But while the evidence may not have panned out, I still think we can say that Elliot was fully aware of what was going on. We hear Elliot Ludwig opening the Playcare in the teaser for Chapter 3.
We owe everything to these children. This company and its toys are nothing without them. That is why it is with enormous pleasure that as the founder of Playtime Co., I announce Playcare, our very own
on-site orphanage.
Did you hear that? We owe everything to these children. That to me sounds like someone who knows exactly what's about to happen to these kids. It's classic hiding the truth in plain sight kind of language. That being said...
Oop, hold on folks, we'll be right back. And we're back.
Has to say that my theory of Elliot being the prototype is totally debunked yet either. Well, this shows that he was fully aware of the experiments and therefore wouldn't have been angry with the doctor and what he was doing. It also doesn't stop him from being turned into the prototype. Consider this. We don't know how old Elliot is at any given point in the story. The best we have to go off of is that he was married at some point in the 1920s and divorced in 1930. The average age of a man getting married in the 1920s was around 25. So let's say that he'd been married a few years before divorcing and was now around 28 in 1930. That would mean that by 1990, Elliot would be around 88, so pretty old, but still kicking. So what if, rather than being got rid of and forced into the experiment, he was a willing participant in that experiment? We see in the VHS video restricted restoration that Playtime is okay with using adults, and specifically adults who are close to death. In Project Playtime's Phase 2 update, we hear the doctor say this:
"Mortality is the curse of the weak."
Which lines up pretty well with the Chapter 2 death screen, "May we forget death." Being in his late 80s, Elliot may have seen the writing on the wall, and while the Playcare was still being set up, he decided to offer himself to the experiment to prove the concept, to help him live forever and to continue seeing Playtime Co. thrive.
But if that was the case, why would the prototype be so violent?
something happens that neither him nor the doctor expected. You see, there's an adult that's turned into brawn, known as Experiment 1199, and a key factor is that he isn't able to remember who he is, or what happened to him. Whereas the other converted toys, the ones made from children, they seem to be able to remember at least something of who they were. They recognize that this character isn't a tortured child like them, and so they attack him. But if that's exactly what happened to 1006, an adult brain might just be unable to truly keep all its memories. Elliot doesn't remember exactly who he is. He's essentially back to his base mindset and instincts, and using his intellect, he's able to put together the pieces, seeing the pain of all the children as they were converted, leading him to lash out and become the evil mastermind that we know today. Despite all the violence and murder, the prototype is essentially a success. The concept of bringing inanimate objects to life using the life of another worked, and so they pressed on with the Bigger Bodies initiative, with their first major success coming in the form of an old toy from 1966, Boxy Boo.
It was impossible, yet you defied all odds. The first of many. Naturally, you have proven my Bigger Bodies initiative a success.
And just in time, too. The doctor always wanted these bigger bodies to fulfill jobs around the factory, and there was a very specific job that he needed resolved, and fast.
Now, we need to start tailoring that appetite of yours to flesh. Where to start? Get me an update on the situation.
Rowan Stoll was the IT guy for Playtime Co. And for a long time, that's all he was. In 1988, he fixed the puzzle pillars, those minigame towers that you find in Project Playtime. And in 1990, he fixed the phone service provider. Nothing major. That was until he started to notice something in early 1991.
Look, I know you don't want to hear any more about this. I get it. Sounds like a bad joke, huggy-wuggy staring at children. If some creep is hiding nanny cams in our mascot's eyeballs, then something that needs to be taken seriously.
What Rowan was seeing wasn't nanny cams. It was the latest of the Bigger Bodies initiative, 1170, and he was watching kids. That was his job. He was the newest security hire.
While we pride ourselves primarily on our high-quality toys and excellent child care, we also pride ourselves on our security.
Naturally, Playtime Co. wasn't a fan of Rowan figuring this out, and so they shut him.
I mean, yeah, technically, with him being the security, yeah, he'd be perfectly fine. He can't bleed, he can't be shot. Unless they take a knife and just start cutting him, they can't do anything to Huggy Wuggy. So, yeah, it's actually not too bad of an idea for a security guard.
Down.
I just want to apologize. I was wrong.
But intimidation wasn't enough. Rowan kept digging. He was an IT guy after all, so he began to build an FTP server with all the information that he'd gathered, even after they sabotaged his car to try and make it seem like it was an accident.
They've been using all the money they've made to experiment on people. I have proof of it all. While security's out, I'm gonna release everything and run.
But Playtime Co. couldn't allow that. The doctor couldn't allow that. And this is where Boxy Boo came in. When Rowan went to investigate, Boxy was waiting. And when the moment was right, sprung out and swallowed him whole. However, this wouldn't be the fate for all employees who defied Playtime Co. In the most recent ARG, we've received an email from the head of security about a dead staff member with puncture wounds in his abdomen, and likely hidden for weeks before being found. This seems to be referencing Rowan, who, even after death, continued to be a nuisance. Now they needed some sort of cover-up story for the police. So going forward, the doctor would correct his mistake. He would try a different approach, one that would make bad employees disappear permanently. In that final FTP dump from Rowan, we got a disciplinary notice for Patty Hall. This name has only come up once before, as an employee who sabotaged the paint machines, causing toys to be recalled and the company to lose profits. We see that for her disciplinary action, she was sent to Storage B by none other than the doctor. And the next time we see Storage B is in the restricted relocation video from 1995, a room filled with bloodied and dead toys, except for a giant kissy missy in the middle of the room. In that final FTP dump, Rowan specifically calls out that people are being experimented on. And then we find Patty Hall being sent to the place where we see a Bigger Bodies initiative experiment. Coincidence? I think not. I think this was the fate of Patty Hall. She defied Playtime Co. and the doctor, and so he turned her into Kissy Missy, where there would be no more trace of her for police. Not all these experiments were complete successes, though. In a report from the newest ARG, we learn of experiments 1186 and 1187. And while we don't know exactly what went wrong, we do know that there were, quote, shortcomings. So it may not be that there are almost 200 living toys active in the factory, but rather that there are around 200 attempts, some of which were successful like Huggy Wuggy, and others that were less so. Regardless, that is a lot of victims. And given that Rowan's report started in early 1991, and the latest experiment number we have is 1222 for Mommy Longlegs, who was invented before her toy was released in 1991, it means that all of this happened in a single year, 1991. You gotta appreciate the efficiency of these guys. And so they needed to develop a more effective way to infuse the orphans they'd acquired with the poppy mixture that was vital vital to the transformation process. So they invented something that we've seen throughout the teasers for Chapter 3, poppy gas. Like I mentioned earlier, poppies have been used throughout history to help kids sleep, and so converting it into a gas is the perfect way to not only get poppies into their bloodstream, but also to sedate them, get them to listen, obey, to sleep, not putting up any kind of fight. Oh, you got.
Oop. Hold on, folks. We'll be right back. And we're back.
Gotta do is give your staff members fun gas masks, like the Mickey Mouse masks from World War II, colored in Playtime Co.'s signature red and yellow so they appear less scary to kids. But they still needed a delivery method, a way to administer the gas to the kids. And this is where the newest ARG once again comes in with the answer. We've received a couple of reports from staff members of the Playcare that tell us a little bit more about the operation that was going on there. The one child that keeps coming up in multiple reports is Theodore Gramble, who apparently was caught sneaking around the Playcare looking for files that a quote-unquote friend told him to find. Quote from the report. I don't know his name. Nobody else knows he exists. Naturally, the counselor's suspicious of this, as the requests for files seem way too specific to be made by just a 7-year-old. A mysterious figure hiding in the shadows that kids don't know exist and is looking for files about the inner workings of Playcare? Sounds to me like Theodore is getting a visit from 1006, and that's exactly what's happening. Literally, as I'm writing this episode, we got another load of images from the ARG, and one of them is a drawing of Theodore sitting on his bed with a familiar black arm reaching out from under him. The prototype is using Theodore to try and stop the entire operation, to free the kids. But sadly, Theodore doesn't work out quite as intended. According to a transcript, he tried to escape, but something malfunctioned and he got electrocuted, stopping his heart and badly burning him. Fortunately and unfortunately, there's a way to save him. At the same time all this was going on, Playtime was developing Experiment 1188, based on one of their newest toy lines, the Smiling Critters, specifically the purple cat, Catnap. This experiment would have massive claws, be able to change its size, and be fitted with, quote, a gas delivery apparatus at the back of the esophagus. This toy was going to be the perfect way to administer the poppy gas to the kids at the Playcare. They just hug and play with their new favorite toy while it slowly released its hallucinogenic gas. And right at the bottom of the document, on the name of potential candidates for conversion, who do we find? None other than Theodore Gramble. He had a horrible accident, maybe even close to death, so they gave him eternal life by turning him into the new villain for Chapter 3. In the Chapter 3 teaser, we see phrases like, "The original saved me, I rejoice in him," which are heavily implied to have been written by Catnap. He worships the original creation. He wishes to do nothing but serve him. Sound familiar? It's just like how the prototype, the original creation, spoke to Theodore, asking him to do things like finding files. Theodore and his new gas powers were put to good use by Playtime Co. No child would ever step out of line like he did again. We see drawings from children about their new giant purple friend, but not all of them are happy. Some kids seem to have nightmares thanks to the red gas that comes out of their new friend's mouth. The worst case that we see is that of Marie Payne, whose sedation thanks to the poppy gas is so severe that she can't even wake up from the nightmares anymore. But while the employees caring for her seem concerned, clearly Playtime Co. got exactly what they wanted. On a transfer request we find in the water treatment control room of Chapter 2, we see the name of the child that would eventually become Mommy Longlegs, Marie Payne. Mommy was eventually moved to the game station, mainly because her trauma at the hands of Playtime led her to be violent towards adults, but motherly and caring towards the children, which made her the perfect fit. Mommy is the last experiment that we know of at this time, Experiment 1222, but I suspect that there are many more based on this photo that we got in the lead up to Chapter 2's release showing the company in its heyday, May of 1992, a year after Mommy Longlegs' creation. But there's still plenty of kids playing around at the game station, more kids to be trained up and taken to Playcare for sedation and conversion. But this is where the tides turn for Playtime Co. Later that year, Huggy Wuggy escapes the facility in the first of many incidents where the bigger bodies monsters start rebelling against the company under the command of 1006. This would come to a climax in 1995 with an event known.
You know, with how long his limbs are, he could almost do like a strange kind of gorilla cheetah run, like using all 4 limbs. Probably would be awkward, but still would be fast as hell because of how long they are. Like, damn.
Hour of Joy, a combined effort of all the toys united against the Playtime Co. staff. So far, all we've seen of this event is an analog video of Kissy Missy going missing, with blood splatter and claw marks everywhere, but we know it doesn't just involve her. In the background of the tape, we can hear screaming from staff members in the factory. The same screams that are heard in the back of the final VHS tape from Chapter 1.
Coordination and cooperation is evidently within his skill set, as well as the skill set of all other experiments of his type, though still missing. Today's events are no doubt in relation to him.
1006 orchestrated the entire event, the Hour of Joy, bringing joy and freedom to the children that he failed all those years ago. With the Playtime staff now either entirely killed or kicked out of the facility, business essentially stops. However, the company tried to remain open in an unusual way. The spin-off title Project Playtime has us take control of extraction specialists, gathering toy parts to be extracted and turned into parts of the Bigger Bodies initiative.
Here's the job. You You need to collect toy parts to make a giant toy. Get that giant toy on the train, then leave.
At this point in history, the bigger bodies toys are running the factory and hunting us down, trying to feed the many toys that remain, while also stopping us from making more monstrosities like themselves.
They are trying to build more toys, more like you. It has to be stopped.
It's not entirely clear how this part of the timeline ends. The game's still releasing phases with new VHS tapes and secret messages from 1006, all with the theme of, hey, we're the ones to blame for this.
We wonder who we are, but why.
Ooh,
you should know. It was your doing that made us, we said that!
Which leads us all to today and the main game. You know, the game that we actually play. 10 years after the factory closed, we show up. A former employee determined to make things right.
But you worked here.
Regular employees like
that is if you watch the main game or play the main game. If you actually watch press start to laugh, you're actually just an employee trying to get his last paycheck.
Rowan weren't aware of what was going on. So for Mommy to know us, we had to have been working at the game station, running experiments on these kids. We were some form of an executive here. Supporting this theory is the fact that there are 5 executive slides down to the game station in Chapter 2. We know all 4 of these characters. The last one, well, the last one's missing a name. I believe that was our slide. If you take the letters on the floor and rearrange them, you don't really get any sort of clear-cut name. In a previous episode, I landed on Jamie B. Honey, only to realize after the fact that I'd accidentally swapped an A for an E. Plus, if you look closely, there are spaces for 5 letters on top and 6 letters on the bottom. The best I can come up with based on those new criteria is Ebony Jemiah. It's not great, so clearly it's still up for grabs. Regardless, I still maintain that we were the head of production for Playtime, the only department on this Chapter 2 floor that's left unaccounted for, with Eddie being the head of research, Stella being the head of play, and Lee Pierre being the head of innovation. We were directly involved in the production of these toys, and so we've
apparently. Oh, hold on, folks. We'll be right back. And we're back. Let's finish this off.
Come back to undo the sins of the past, or probably more likely to bury them once and for all. We show up, we knock out Huggy, we free Poppy from her case, we split Mommy in 2 and get her dragged away by 1006, escaping the game station only for something to derail us outside of Playcare. And there you have it, folks, the complete timeline of Poppy Playtime so far. Almost entirely based on fact, with a couple of theories thrown in there that are very well supported at this point.
Oh,
Will Chapter 3 affect all this? Will we see Theodore the cat? Will the smiling critters be able to be saved, or is it too late for them? We're only a few weeks away, so time will tell. In the meantime, remember, it's not a good idea to use science to create living toys out of orphans, but it is a good idea to use science to get you to drink more water, and there's no one who does that better than
alright, so that's what we're going to have to end up in today's episode. Sorry about that. Anyway, folks, thank you all for joining me in today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below. And I'll see all you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.